consume an inordinate amount of energy. We need to know why and how is that energy going to be found to run it. What does it mean for the workforce? Are we all going to lose our jobs and spend life walking up and down the beach, staring out to sea? And what are the ethics of AI? Who's controlling it? And is it going to have a moral character?
Yeah.
So let's hand over to our special interest guests.
Yes, firstly, Julian Fay and then Stephen Rando. So, Julian.
Great. Hi, everybody. Great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Julian Fay. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Senetas, which is a Melbourne-based SME. We're ASX listed, and we've spent 25 years working in the cybersecurity industry. And our area of expertise is building solutions to protect infrastructure, so communication networks. We have encryption solutions for communication networks and for data at rest. So I'm not an AI professional developer or designer. I have a huge personal interest in AI. We're using it at work and kind of testing the limits of how appropriately we can use it in a very security-sensitive environment, which we always have to bear in mind.
Pretty important areas you're protecting.
Absolutely, yeah. We protect a lot of defence infrastructure, a lot of critical infrastructure, both in Australia and in more than 60 countries overseas.
Oh, good God.
So,
it's a bit of an Australian success story that we don't hear about.
Yeah, we're very proud that everything is designed and manufactured in Victoria. We're just down in South Melbourne. Yeah. And, we export to protect some of the largest infrastructure environments in the world.
Fantastic.
So I'm really looking forward to the chat.
Thanks for joining us. Stephen Rando.
And thank you again. Absolute pleasure, and what an incredible topic to be here with you. So I started my PhD journey on the ethical and societal implications of AI in digital flows in banking and manufacturing. And specifically, I'm researching how safe AI will be used across these industries and sectors. Now, through my 20 years of experience, I have studied, worked within technology, and now just to be here again talking about this new industrial revolution is just a new step. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure about you, Julian, but it feels like I'm starting again in my own technology acumen of starting fresh in terms of where this is going and how it's being used.
So let's start with trying to explain to we lay people what AI actually is. And we're all now very aware of, using our computers to do just about everything, and we have one of these gadgets in our pocket, and it has more computing power than the first moon shots. And, obviously we've just had another round of going around the moon. We didn't touch that down as yet, but I'm sure they used a bit more computing power than they did in 1968.
Yes.
So we're all familiar with using computers. We're all familiar with using them as a tool, but we still have the concept of garbage in, garbage out, right? Let's start with breaking it down to what is different about AI. How do these, you use the term LLM, can you explain that to us, and how does it actually work?
Okay, well, it might be helpful just to give a sort of brief history of the development of artificial intelligence.
That's brilliant.
Yes.
And Stephen, feel free to jump in. I'm
Yes.
sure we'll have different perspectives on this.
Yes.
So the concept of AI is actually developed after World War II. It started in the sort of 1950s in the US, where the idea of, well, even you could argue actually even before that, Alan Turing, the British eminent, brilliant, probably arguably one of the greatest minds of all time, came up with this idea of the universal machine, which was a sort of a philosophy of how we could build a computer that would be generally useful and could compute a wide range of tasks. And it's been a sort of journey over the last 70 or 80 years to make that vision and turn it into a reality. As I say, starting back in the 1950s. The first generation of AI was really an attempt to kind of codify expert human knowledge by a set of rules that was called expert systems.
Right.
So the idea would be that you might sort of go to a doctor and say, this guy's an expert. I'm just going to ask him a whole bunch of questions. If a patient comes in the morning and they've got a temperature and they're sneezing and they look like this, then what does that probably mean they've got? It might mean they have the flu. And then you ask them some questions. And that instinctively might feel like the right approach to kind of train a computer to do generally useful things. But it turns out that the world is so inherently messy, so complex, and there are so many edge cases that kind of codifying that in a set of simple rules doesn't really work.
So it's basically inflexible.
Inflexible, not flexible enough to meet the messy reality of nature and of human lives. So it became very clear that that approach, and there's this if you look at the history of AI, there's this term AI winter, which often comes up, which is the idea of people getting very, very excited about an approach that seems to be leading to a very promising solution and a sort of breakthrough, and then ultimately leads to disappointment because it hits some sort of natural dead end and doesn't really go anywhere.
There's a graph about that in terms of innovations. You have the anticipation, and there's the valley of disappointment, and
then the peaks of maturity. John,
that's
actually right.
yes,
And
yes.
we've seen this across multiple sectors, right? So 1970s, we've seen the supercomputer. From early 2000s, we've seen the internet. And now from 2020 to 23, we've seen AI, artificial intelligence, but we've seen these GUI. So these players that have come through, like ChatGPT, Gemini, and many others, have now given us another platform to use this type of technology the way that we're using it today, right?
But how is all this information is it being fed into one single source? Or does it all...
Great question.
Yeah, good question.
So the real breakthrough was a mindset change that said, instead of codifying these rules for computers, we will actually come up with a way that computers can learn themselves how the world works. And that's called machine learning.
Right.
That's called machine learning. And you've probably heard of the phrase neural networks, which is the current architecture on which the current generation of AI models are built upon. And a neural network is a sort of vague attempt to sort of emulate the way that animal brains work. To the best of our understanding. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's kind of similar. So if you look at what a neuron is, the best way I like to think of it is a sort of evidence weighing machine. So a neuron is a very small unit of compute that takes some inputs. It considers the relative importance of those inputs and then gives you a 0 or 1 as an output. And as a human, we all do this, throughout our normal lives. Let's say you're deciding whether to go out on Saturday night. You've had an invite to go into the city, and you're kind of weighing up, are my mates going to be there? Is there a good band on? What's the price of petrol? Or am I tired and could I be bothered? So you kind of weigh up all of the different factors that lead you. And a neuron basically does the same thing in a very small unit of compute. So the real breakthrough was in a technology called deep learning, which essentially nests ultimately billions of these neural networks.
And the data sets on how they've all been brought together. So think of fabric and how they're all connected as part of that large language model.
Right. So it's a neural network. It's a network of computers that are actually constantly learning off each other based on the various inputs that they're getting.
Well, the real breakthrough, and you may be familiar with Geoffrey Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize this year. He's often called one of the godfathers of AI. Very well known.
These two know about it. Clearly.
Well, we might talk about him later because he's also a famous sort of doomer at the moment.
Yes.
So that's a very interesting perspective.
Love a bit of doom.
Yeah.
Yes.
But he was at the University of Toronto, and he had a team. So for many years, this neural network approach was also not really going anywhere, and people thought it was probably going to lead to another AI winter. But he worked out that his team worked out if you nested millions and billions of these neural networks together, there was a way that you could start them with essentially zero knowledge of the world, and you could input labeled data. So let's give a simple example. Let's say you wanted to train some sort of AI model to recognize whether a photo is a bird, yes or no. Now, if you think how you would do that in plain English, that's very, very difficult to do. Has it got feathers? Has it got wings? Where's the wing? You might try and come up with some sort of mathematical heuristic about the angle of the beak and stuff like that. It just doesn't want to work. But they worked out a way that you could basically feed in millions and millions of images, some of which are birds, labelled 1. Others are dogs, tractors, cars, labelled 0. And these neural networks could learn from that information using technically it's called backpropagation, which is a mathematical algorithm that basically says if I make one very small change to this small unit of compute, it has these mathematical numbers associated with it called parameters. Do I get closer or further away from recognizing this is a bird? So is my answer slightly better or slightly worse? So essentially what this learning process does is it's doing millions and millions of tiny little tweaks to make this huge computer algorithm slightly better than it was the last time that you went through this loop, just slightly better. And there's a mathematical way you can measure is it slightly better or not. And it turns out that if you do that with big enough computers and big enough data, then the computers can truly learn themselves the structure of this
So is
information.
this why you need massive data centers?
It is exactly why. Well, you need massive data sets.
Yes.
Yes.
And you need massive computers. So there's a scaling law, isn't there?
Where do the
correct.
massive data sets come from?
The data sets basically come from, based on the LLM and how they're built,
Yes.
basically then be acute based on infrastructure. So like anything, back in the day, mainframe would cost about $1 million and would equate to maybe terabytes of data, but you would need X amount of box and power. Today, the LLMs and basically how they've progressed is that the power is now reduced, or it's gone the other way. So it's a lot cheaper now to run that data set based on the data and the infrastructure that's required to run that algorithm.
But at some point, at the very beginning of the neural network,
Yes.
the human input is what at that point?
It's a data set.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting to.
yeah.
So the data set. So the human decides what data set to begin the process with.
That's a fascinating point. What we used to do was label data.
Right.
So we would actually curate a set of data. It could be anything. It could be images. It could be text, and it would literally say, "This is a car. This is a cow. This is a sheep."
Right.
And the neural network model would be just trying to get to the closer to this is a cow than this is not a cow if it was a cow.
Yeah.
That was done for many years, and there was a famous competition called ImageNet, I think it was, where the global computer industry was trying to kind of achieve the next breakthrough in recognizing images. And for many years, it was a plateau, this kind of this AI winter. And then Geoffrey Hinton's team built this architecture that broke through and made a fundamental watershed moment in proving that these new architectures could recognize images using this labeled approach.
Right.
But actually, in the latest technology, which is large language models, the input to these is predominantly text. It's not labeled images or things like that.
Or decimal places on how the mathematical models were used as well. So
Yes.
the actual imagery of text. Yeah, so alphabetical
Yeah.
text
So
converting to an outcome. So think of the feedback loop,
Yes.
input, review, and output.
Yeah.
So the LLM was based on that prompting and that text style approach.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the text is coming from
The internet.
The internet.
internet. So
Yeah.
it's hoovering up the information.
When you
on the
think about
internet.
it,
Yes.
language is self-labeling.
Yes.
So if I say to you, complete this sentence, fish and,
Chips.
yeah, you're not going to say fish and carburettor.
No, that's right.
But carburettor, in some weird language, some weird conversation, could be an appropriate answer, maybe.
Yes.
There's a subtle difference between who is Snow White
Yes.
and why is Snow White.
Yes.
So the incredible breakthrough of these latest generation of large language models, which is driven by a breakthrough from Google, where they came up with something called the transformer architecture, was recognizing that language itself is kind of self-labeling. And it turns out we have a huge amount of text, the internet,
Yes.
every book ever written,
Yes.
everything. And if you basically suck up that entire history of written text
Okay.
of the internet,
So
and
that's
you
your
train
data
on it,
set.
that's your data set.
But then
That's the
you
data
run into issues that we're having right at this very moment about the copyright issue, about
Absolutely.
the large language models are copying people's work, their IP, for the basis of saying, well, we need to build this big data set. But the people who own the copyright, like if I'm a writer and I've written something, I don't want to give you that.
There's also
access
the
to
other
that.
complexity that we're reviewing and using this information. And John raised this earlier. There was 100 million people that used one of these LLMs, ChatGPT, in 1 week. Now, if you look at a graph, and I'm going to try to paint you a picture model, it took for 100 million people to use the internet, it took over years. It took people to use this product, this text-based product, in 1 week.
In 1 week. Because our level of comfort
and
acceptance has become universal.
And
Now, there
also
is some-
everybody wants
But
to
then the
be
question
playing
is
with the
it,
new big
and
thing.
we'll interrogate this a bit later too, that its level of comfort and acceptance, has it become dependence?
And back to the point
that's-
of what I'm trying to make is based on Hinton in terms of the architecture, the transform architecture, many of these brands or these technology consumable products we're using, we haven't thought about what data we've put in and maybe challenge that, but then also challenge to your point on copyright, that is the data set that I'm getting out based on the knowledge is true and correct. And copyright is still a very progressive matter at the moment in terms of who owns the knowledge, who owns the data set, and then how's that data set then transformed for their own IP. And we've seen some incredible valuations. I'll go around the room. Guess how much the current industry is worth at the moment?
No, it wouldn't,
Trillions.
it wouldn't begin.
$15 trillion.
Yes, yes.
based on what we were talking about before on that data set, that is really the pie or really the cash point of the data being stored.
That's almost as much money as the Victorian government owes.
Almost. Almost. It's close to the amount of money that the CFMEU would like to have.
And to add on just
Yes.
to Julian's point in terms of that evolution,
Yes.
these major players have come in to basically take a market share. And as Julian was explaining, there's different mathematical models. It could be a knowledge model. It could be a learning model. We've seen now there's legal models.
Yes.
And we're seeing these data sets or these conceptions of these models being used for specific industries.
Yeah. So look, I mentioned before in the intro that I'd used it. We a group have used it for a business modelling on a finance company, right? And I will name it. It's Anthropic's Claude. Yeah, and it was very good at doing that. It responded very well to the inputs we gave it with the parameters of what we expected in terms of where the funding's coming from, the equity, and then the loan book and how did that look and all the rest of it, and the loss ratios and et cetera. It did a lot of that by itself because it knew from obviously previous learning that it had done. Very impressive, but still needed a human to check it.
Of course.
And I guess from what you're telling us, that will not necessarily be the case in the future because it learns every iteration.
Well, that's a fascinating point you've made. What we've actually done is we've transitioned from essentially deterministic computers, where we expect them to compute in the same way and give us a predictable answer,
Yes.
to a type of computing that is more like a human. It's non-deterministic. And that means it will make mistakes. They call this hallucinations or confabulations. And its answer to the same question will change over time. I don't think we can say that AI today is going to make lots of mistakes, but AI in the future is going to be perfect and it will be completely trustworthy. I don't think that is the case.
So like a human that may make a whole lot of new mistakes.
Exactly.
Because there's a whole new lot of data coming in.
Well, to your financial analogy, I mean, if you've got a junior employee to do that work, you would want to check their work as well, I guess.
Of course. And largely in my experience in business at the moment, I'm seeing AI in its relative infancy, as you've mentioned, being used in that sense, like the junior or the intern. Yeah.
And this is a great example, John, of what we call, I guess, inception or education of using the product. Now, instead of you employing a financial controller or you outsourcing that work to someone, you've used it as an assistant.
Correct.
So this is brilliant. And this is where we need the Australian public and many others to use it as an assistant, a virtual assistant, and using it with you 24/7. The other point to that is you rightly said you have to recheck it again and really question, is that right? Or what else do I need to tweak for that requirement?
Because you're questioning yourself as well. Did I give it the right inputs?
Correct. And we have this other term of, over prompting and, prompting paralysis, et cetera. But in the scale of a framework and architecture, you've added one small point where you've got some data for financially.
Yeah.
But if we go now and you used your whole business for a agentic use of AI, could you use all of AI to run your business, John?
That's actually an interesting question because in this group that I'm working with at the moment, we're having exactly that debate. Do we bother getting a CFO or do we all know enough that we can check the work of the virtual CFO?
And I guess, and Julian, you can see where I'm going with this in terms of the models of now where we're seeing how AI is so profound is because these are now available. These options are now available to you to use as a tool or capability.
So is the system also taking into account regulation and legislation when it comes up with suggestions of how you're going to run your business?
We gave this also parameters in terms of what is
legal,
what regulatory parameters there are in terms of how much you can loan and how much so on and so forth.
But you have to think of that as a hint.
Yes.
You have to say, please look at these regulations. Please put it in the context of these. But you should not expect it will, remain completely true to that. It's just a hint. You're always going to have to check it.
Yes. And we found this also with another use that we've made again of Claude was a member survey. You know what I'm talking about, a member survey. And we got the raw data from the member survey and we put it into Claude to give us the analysis and a statistical analysis of the nature that you would get in the past from a survey company.
Yes.
We could do this ourselves. We didn't have to pay a survey company.
Yeah,
right?
which is amazing, and
is
I
great.
don't think you should discount this, John. And we discount it like, oh, it's that easy, but look how much time that's now
It saved a
saved.
tremendous amount of time and money.
And money.
But an important term we need to speak of, and this is toil. So as part of the history of the artificial intelligence throughout the years of technology and evaluation, is now that toil of that task now no longer has to be completed now, John. So the decisions now, or the elevation of thinking, can now be extended to creative value, John.
It's a fascinating point.
So it's not so much you spending time now reviewing those stats, John. It's getting you that report for the end to do critical analysis to work out why, how, and is that correct?
So what it did, but two things. So what it did, which was exactly that, it short-circuited the whole process. So we're able to report back much faster,
Yes.
and be able to make decisions based on that analysis much faster, right? However, when it then veered into a narrative to summarise the statistical analysis it had done, it did not understand the context, right?
Of course.
And so it made recommendations that were completely irrelevant or counter to the context in which this piece of work was done.
So the data was right. But
So the data was
output
right.
wasn't.
Its
Understanding of-
understanding of the environment was not.
Of course.
And that's probably because we didn't give it an understanding of the environment.
And this is where we've seen, education play a big role in terms of that maturity I speak of. So how to master prompt, the what, the why, the how, the parameters around that. So kind of get that done once rather than multiple times,
Yeah.
John. Then two is then how do you then evolve that to the next stage, then give you the actual outcome that you needed when I spoke of that feedback loop.
Yeah.
That was generated many months ago. And then thirdly is then that maturity of how you then incept that further within the outcome you're looking to reach. And when I'm saying that is that, I'm going to be very honest here, John, I am president of the organisation or the partner. Please review that analytically based on being a partner of the firm and that outcome. So this is the evolution I speak of, John, where you've just taken it, but you need to then think up a higher. You could say, I'm a McKinsey expert, or I'm the president of a country. Please review it based on these parameters.
God forbid both of those, but anyway, move on. Yes.
And this is really where the extent comes from of how it can be used and how it can be stretched in terms of that knowledge. Yeah. But again, I do need to advise of a caveat here, because part of Australia, there's about 79% that are just performing this specific role. So just prompting and using it to a feedback loop.
Yep.
What we've found is that return on investment still hasn't been properly equated for yet, but also, Julian, to your point, is that maturity around using it end to end. So where the architectures come now is we've seen transformer architecture as part of just a basic LLM to AI agentic architecture of multiple LLMs connecting all in a fabric in an ecosystem, John. Bit like this round table, we both have expertise, but if we brought it all together, it will then give us an outcome or output, bit like the podcast here today. And then full maturity. So you then overseeing how that functions.
Right.
So that's the fascinating part of the next evolution of where AI is going. Julian, but
look, completely agree. That's been the big evolution. This year has been from simple prompts to agentic AI. And look, I don't know about you, Stephen.
Sorry, by agentic we mean an AI agent, essentially.
Yeah, it's an agent, like a virtual assistant that is performing some job in a loop, not just a one-shot
in the
response.
traditional sense of what an agent does for you.
Exactly, exactly. It has agency.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know about you. I find it exhausting just keeping up with this new intelligence.
You
that's in
find
the
it
world.
exhausting. Imagine how we feel.
It's literally every week there is a bombshell moment. I mean, maybe we'll talk about it later. In the security industry this week, there was a new model from Anthropic who makes that Claude AI that you talked about. They just released a kind of super agent that turns out to be extremely good at cybersecurity.
Right.
That is literally probably a game changer for the industry.
Right.
But the cognitive load to kind of keep up with this is just like, we're all wrecked.
And there's a key word there, Julian, and this is disruption.
Yes.
And I don't use it lightly, because we've seen in 1 week a company disrupt another company. And I go back to the Blockbuster Netflix moment, where Blockbuster were basically about to transform and Netflix came in the day after.
Just killed them.
And killed them. Now, right now, we've got a technology and architecture that can kill not only a company, but basically wipe them off straight away in 1 week.
So this brings us to our second segment, because we need to move on to the next segment. I think we were going to talk about why does it need so much power, but I think we now understand, because these
Doing a
neural
lot of
networks
computing.
is
Yeah.
doing a lot of
A lot
computing.
of them. Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
And look,
Yeah.
I don't know the
Yes.
exact stat, but I can at least tell you there's at least 365 types of AI on the market at the moment. I can definitely give you a stat in China just before coming here. There's about 160 LLMs that they've built specifically for their nation, and they own about 60% of the patents. So from a legal perspective or business perspective, that the market is being flooded.
So we're going to see, and we'll come to this later, but we're going to see a competition for control of the AI market.
and capability.
And capability.
Specific capabilities that they will provide to give them
How
a unique
How
proposition.
unusual that humankind will
Yes.
inevitably find a way to compete with each other.
And then they'll be able to control the information that is fed out in terms of responses to the prompts.
That's right. And we've seen some great models with Gemini and ChatGPT where they're doing specific functions, but then we've seen very specific modules like the legal system that's just focusing on those aspects or that industry.
So let's
Yeah.
just come to, therefore,
The impact.
the impact, the disruption. We've seen the Industrial Revolution 150, 200 years ago. We've seen here in Australia the deindustrialisation
Yes.
of Australia. Kind of a dumb move, we now realise, but there we go.
Oh, too late.
Oops, too late, yes. Yes.
Well, the British decided they were going to become a service industry, and then
How
they
did that
found
work
out
out?
in the
Not
Yes.
well.
Not
GFC,
particularly
that
well,
wasn't a
yes.
great,
The standard rule with that sort of deindustrialisation with labour force is because they're semi-skilled jobs, 1/3 of people will find a job of equivalent standard in terms of income. 1/3 of people will take a drop but still find something to do. 1/3 of people will never work again, either voluntarily or involuntarily. That has been repeated over and over and over
Yes.
where industries have been shut down. And you would say, why does that happen? Well, that's just the nature of that's the kind of workforce you end up with. Yeah.
And the implications of technology, right?
Yes.
And the evolution of how manufacturing has been produced,
Correct.
right?
So,
yeah.
so you can now manufacture, as I mentioned before, you can go to a truck factory and watch 4 guys build trucks. Thousands of them.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. Moving on.
And to your point, John, just staying on this. So, and Julian, you might have seen it, but there's a graph. And basically, in terms of your manufacturing, but also in the technology industry. So we spoke of the 1970s to where we are today. Now, in terms of roles in technology, they've never really dipped. So there's never really been a decline of technology roles that have equated from this. And I'm sure Julian and I are going to have a great, deep and meaningful on this, right, John? But to your point, the opportunity now to start a business, to build a new car based on what is available to them today has never been so easy ever before, right?
Well, yes and no. Because the easier you make it, the lower a barrier in entry you make to getting into a business,
Yes.
the more competition you generate, the more cutthroat it becomes, the more price-driven it becomes, the more difficult it is to make money, and people drop out the bottom.
Yes.
So you have a high burn rate, right? That's typically what happens. We see that in all sorts of industries. So the question, though, that we need to now interrogate is the AI revolution is at the very beginning. It's in its infancy. We've said it's in 2020, post-pandemic, basically,
Yes.
right? What sort of disruption is this going to do to not the industrial jobs per se, because that's already been sorted largely, the white-collar jobs?
Yes.
Yeah? And how are kids going to go from base level to management supervisory level if, as I suspect you're going to say, there's a hollowing out of something in between?
Yeah. So maybe, Julian, you start, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt that we're going through a technology revolution.
Yes.
And are you familiar with Carlota Perez? She's a Venezuelan economist who studies the history of technology revolutions. Fantastic kind of reference to sort of how helps me how we think about this. And she studies the Industrial Revolution that you mentioned, the introduction of electricity, the automobile. And it's a bit like that Gartner hype cycle that you mentioned, where we kind of have a curve for new technologies. This is kind of the cycle on the grand scale throughout history. And she has shown that time and time again, when these new technologies are introduced into the world, they follow the same sort of path. And the first path is they're kind of introduced, and there's an enormous, great expectation,
Huge,
hype,
this is the
a
Gartner
great
hype
bubble,
cycle.
the global
Yes,
burp.
yes,
And then exactly the same as the hype cycle, there's some sort of crash.
Yes.
And that crash could be a financial crash, could be the Great Depression, it could be a war. It could be but essentially, it often requires a fundamental rewiring of institutions, our economic institutions, our business institutions, our political institutions, to some degree. And then hopefully we come out of that into some golden period where the benefits of the technology really become pervasive throughout society.
Yes.
And if you look at what's happening now in the geopolitical arena, you could argue that maybe we are starting to go through this great kind of disruption and the signs of this readjustment for a whole range of reasons. Obviously, what's happening
We
is
could
not
talk
just the
forever
AI.
about the economic reasons for that. And
But so there's some sort of model that I think helps us think about. I think the impact will be profound. We can talk about jobs specifically. I'm sure we'll have opinions on that in a minute. But I think we're going through a period of profound change. Honestly, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. You look at experts, there are...
That is the most honest thing anyone can
Yes.
say.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
We
Nobody
don't
knows.
know,
We don't
really.
know. No, we
We're
don't
all
know.
trying to figure this out.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're saying, even MIT, Harvard are trying to review how businesses now formed. We definitely know the displacement of jobs. So what jobs will be of the future? About 65 million new roles will be discovered as part of that. So there's a good friend of mine, Dr. Alan
I'll
Thorogood.
pull you up right there.
Yes.
And we hear this very often, and we hear it from our politicians who are full of hype because that's what they live on. Yes, they don't like disappointment; they like to push hype. So we hear, there are going to be thousands of new jobs, and the guy pushing papers 14 levels down goes, "What the hell am I going to do? I don't even know how to turn this thing on."
And this is where the cross-skilling comes in, John. So you're right. You've got someone performing a low-level task that may not have had the opportunity to learn a different skill or have the opportunity to cross-skill, which we're going. So this is a great mental picture. You've got CEO, some middle managers, and low-level workers.
Yep.
And each of them are performing a specific task. The opportunity now we're seeing organisations is cross-skilling those individuals to perform different tasks. So what is he going to do? He'll have an opportunity to perform that task.
Who's going to teach him that?
Hopefully, the organisation will instill an AI adoption maturity framework that will allow that individual to learn and educate themselves
I
on
know
the
I'm
model.
jumping around, but
Yes.
I want to dig further. Who's going to teach the kids to learn that way? Are we changing our education system sufficiently?
I have spoken to a number of individuals in the education sector, and it is most displaced where I've seen high maturity of use of AI, and I found that there is no AI use, or unfortunately no use in AI in that sector.
Because if you need to learn to cross-skill,
Yes.
it isn't just on the employer to tell you. The employer is going to be looking for candidates who already have that flexibility of mind.
Yes.
That
Yes.
means that we need to train that flexibility of mind and critical thinking
Yes.
and ability to cross skills
I think
in
agility.
the young people.
Yeah.
as well as the strategy for the organisation to, again, adopt and change the way they do things as well. So we're seeing a number of interesting sectors, and I can tell you 24 manufacturers in Australia haven't even started their journey of AI. So they're producing widgets and bobs and bolts, and they're not even changing the way that they work, but they're still able to somehow perform and become profitable at this stage. Yeah.
Surely the future belongs to the companies that are going to be bold enough and motivated enough to make these changes, because they have to realise that they have to adapt or die.
And what we're
effectively.
seeing now, and Julian, I think you're going to agree, we've got organisations that are run by one individual that are performing multiple tasks. We're seeing at the moment 137,000 new specific roles of AI engineers that are being deployed into organisations to build specific LLMs, large language models, for their organisations.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jevons paradox is the kind of the history of what's happened when a technology has come in the world. When you make something really cheap and easily affordable, you kind of go, well, this is going to put a lot of people out of jobs and a lot of traditional roles. But, you know, the history is that we basically create new roles and humans find new ways to earn money. Like, who'd have thought an influencer was going to be
Is
a
it
career?
really a thing? I mean, honestly, is it really a
Yeah,
sustainable
paid.
thing?
I've got several friends
I know,
whose children
I
are
know.
making a perfectly good... That
Yes.
is,
I know.
I think you would be surprised.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not
think
sure
you'd
it's
be
got much of a
surprised.
retirement plan
But is
attached
it
to it. But
sustain-
anyway,
is it
Well, they're making a lot of
sustainable?
money.
Making a lot of money, yes.
But it isn't. I mean, okay, we don't want to get sidetracked into influencers, but
Yes,
it's kind of like a fragile career,
it is a fragile.
because the technology can change
Yes.
overnight.
Absolutely.
And-
But everything's fragile now.
So that's that. So
Everything
the
is.
permanence
Yeah.
that the
And it's becoming
permanence that-
acceptable as well.
Except plumbing.
Yes,
Plumbing is
plumbing
one
is
thing.
permanent,
yes.
I think you're okay.
Toilet paper.
both
Yeah.
human and otherwise.
Yeah.
The permanence that and the feeling of permanence and stability that marked the I guess the maturity of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
So from the mid 19th century through to the post-war period, there was a sense of permanence that things were done over that 100 years pretty much the same. The technology was
we've always done
moving
it.
from steampunk to
Sure.
a bit more sophisticated, but basically you're boiling water to turn a turbine round with steam, right?
And now it's all in China.
Yeah, now it's all in China. And so there was a maturity of that technology, but it wasn't a fundamental leap. So it felt permanent. What you're talking about is a continual disruptive environment.
Well, so Goldman Sachs...
Or is it?
Well, Goldman Sachs just put out a survey, which is some sort of data point. And again, if you listen to the leaders at these frontier AI companies, at Google, at OpenAI, Anthropic, they all have a very diverse range of opinions about the impact. And I think we're going through a fundamental moment in history where you have half the people are technical optimists and the other half are technical pessimists.
You talked about Hinton.
Yes.
Can we
Hinton.
just come back to his doomsaying?
I'd
Because
love to
we love a
tell
bit
you.
of doomsaying.
You want a bit of doom? I'll give you some doom.
Let's have
Hit
some
him
doom.
with the doom,
This
Julian.
is so interesting.
Yes.
So Geoffrey Hinton, one of the godfathers of AI, came up with this deep learning architecture, sold himself to Google. He basically put together him and two mates and said, "You should buy us as a business because we're future Nobel Prize winners."
Yes.
Sold himself to Google, and then all of a sudden, about I think it was 2024, he announced his resignation. One of the world-leading computer scientists at the best company, arguably. And people said, "Why did you leave?" And he said, "Because I didn't realize how powerful AI was becoming, and I am seriously concerned about an existential risk. And I can tell you technically why I have this existential risk." And he has spent the last 2 years just talking. You can find him on podcasts, YouTube. It's so interesting. He has some very specific technical reasons why he thinks AI is a threat. Now, I should say, a lot of his peers completely disagree with him. They think he's like fear-mongering. But his technical threat is...
Churchill didn't have many people believing him either.
Well, exactly. His particular argument, I'll be very quick, is that if you look at the number of neural connections in the human brain, I think there's 100 trillion neural connections, something like that. If you look at something like GPT-4, it's estimated there might be 1 trillion. Yet, ChatGPT-4 knows a lot more than any of us as humans do about the world.
I think average IQ is, 136
Is that
for
right?
that. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So he says, how is this possible? He said it is quite likely that digital learning is more efficient than biological learning. It might be that we've actually developed a far more efficient learning technique that will scale. And he says, furthermore, imagine if you want to communicate between humans. Let's say you want to tell me all about your job at the bank. You can't plug a USB stick into my brain and download what you know. You would have to verbalize it. We need a lot of beers and a lot of pubs for months before I can even get close to your level of competence.
I think that's a great way to spend the afternoon with you, Julian.
Yeah, well, let's do it. But an AI model, the intelligence of the AI model is literally mathematical floating point numbers that I can copy instantaneously to multiple copies of an AI intelligence. So they have this kind of hive mind capability.
Now we're talking about Skynet.
Potentially. So his point, though, is that you can have multiple AIs all running around learning different things, one focusing on how to make a better car, one focusing on how to solve nuclear fusion. As soon as any one of them learns something, they can instantly update all of them. So they have this collective intelligence. It's a bit like, have you seen that Apple TV show, Pluribus, that came out just before Christmas? It's a bit like that. And he also points out that these are immortal. You can't kill them because it's literally numbers in a spreadsheet. A lot of them, but it's numbers in a spreadsheet. So he says it might, and this is like just so interesting to me, he thinks that biological intelligence could be just an evolutionary step on the way to digital intelligence.
Okay, so let me just interrogate that for a second. Let me just interrogate that for a second. So I made reference to Skynet. So for those who don't know, Skynet was famously the AI that controlled the robots that was trying to eliminate the human race in the Terminator movies. Right, and it was an AI that had become sentient and decided that its creators were no longer necessary, and I'll use the robots to get rid of them. I don't remember the particular case, but I did read in the Wall Street Journal a little while ago that there were 2 AI examples where AI demonstrated self-preservation. One where it was aware that it was going to be shut down, and it uploaded, as you just said, all of its knowledge to another AI model to preserve itself. And another that lied about what was going on in order to stop the humans from shutting it down.
Well, even this week, Anthropic has released a new model called Mythos Preview that is so powerful that they refuse to let it out to the public. It has the ability of an ASD or NSA level cyber expert to find vulnerabilities in computer systems. Literally, it has found thousands of vulnerabilities that have been in all of our standard software stacks for the last 20 years. It's just absolutely breathtaking. So they have given that very responsibly to sort of 40 leading tech companies to use to try and patch the problems, before an adversary gets it.
And them on the dark web?
Yeah, well, I mean, today's AI is the worst it will ever be.
Right.
It's only going to get far more capable from this.
It's not only fascinating, it's somewhat sobering. I mean, if Jeffrey Hinton's predictions are correct, we're in deep trouble.
So let's talk about the ethics of AI then.
Perfect
This is the time
segue.
to get into that. And who's controlling it? What moral boundaries are they working within? And also from the perspective of responsible government.
Yes, and I've got a government example we can talk about in a minute.
You know, we're in a global world, but the differences between governments are quite stark, as we've seen recently.
Yes.
The difference between, say, the American government and the Iranian government, as an example. So you've got good actors and bad actors.
Yes.
In government, in power, with money. They've got more money than anybody else, so they can afford to sponsor or support the development of these things. So how do we retain some semblance of normality and control and moral authority?
It's a very good question. Look, I'm a bit of an optimist when it comes to responsible artificial intelligence use or frameworks they're using to build these platforms.
That's because you're not old enough.
That's right.
Could be cynical.
Yeah. That's right. Just wait.
There are
Give it a
instances,
minute.
which is wonderful, that there is a responsible AI lens being used. Bias, transparency, how the data's been concept and used, and then how it's kind of deployed out to a customer. So there's Privacy Act of where that data's stored, how it's stored, etc., and how it's shared. The second part of that responsible AI use is there's still not enough evidence, and to Julian's point, is still not known yet on what is defined as safe AI. So what can I put hand on heart saying, if you use this tool to help you in a medical episode or to help you manufacture a new car, would it be safe to use? Well, can I tell you, gentlemen, and I'm still a lot younger than all of the three gentlemen you here, but no system that's been built has ever been perfect.
No.
And the systems that have been built out of that 365 elements, I can guarantee, based on Julian, the vulnerabilities and security penetrations that would be part of that product. Two, that some of the vulnerabilities in that product of how that information's used or how it's given to a generic response back, because again, the parameters haven't been set, or if it's about to anti-shut down, someone has thought about that scenario in terms of what default option that it's used. So there's probably 2 points I'm trying to make. One is there is instances of responsible use of AI. We've seen numerous cases of judges, lawyers, organisations that have been caught out because they've used that AI and trusted it for the betterment of their business, but unfortunately was incorrect, but they've still trusted that. So who is liable? And then I guess to the third point of what I'm trying to make is that there are some ethical use of how they're being used at the moment for the greater good of humanity.
First thing I'll say is that we know who's liable.
Yes.
Because if you have a responsibility to deliver a task and there are legal implications to it, and no matter what tool you use, if you're not exercising your responsibility appropriately, you're liable.
Yes.
So it's simple as that.
Yes.
So it's the same as when people ask, well, what's the situation in autonomous vehicles? Who's responsible? Well, if there are levels of autonomy, and so if you're at level 4, which is the vehicle is autonomously operating, but you are the driver on board, you are responsible because you are the captain of that ship.
While you still have the opportunity to intervene.
To intervene. If it is level 5, which is totally not in the control of the passenger, the responsibility lays with the people who are managing that.
Yes.
In other words, who owns the program that's running the vehicle.
And we've seen some great catastrophic companies that have collapsed based on that.
Yes.
So we've seen a car manufacturer in San Fran where unfortunately there was some injuries.
Yeah.
that organisation was no longer the day after. So you just know from a reputational perspective, you just can't get that back, right? So this is where I'm saying where safe AI really needs to be the core point of before you even put liquid or food in your mouth, you want to know where that comes from, how it was produced. You know, if you've got an analogy, I want to make sure that how that was produced that can guarantee
So you
that that
need
doesn't
to
come
come
through.
to brand value.
Who's building those guardrails?
Well, I think we have a fundamental challenge at the moment.
Yes.
Unlike something like nuclear technology, this technology is not controllable.
We don't have an IAEA for AI.
Exactly. There's no fissile material that we can track.
Yes.
And it is current. And ironically, we live in a period of history where possibly one of the most profound and impactful technologies ever developed has come at the same time, whereas we as a species can't even seem to talk to each other in measured,
That's
respectful
not really
tones.
changed a great deal, Julian. We
Well-
There are fewer wars now than
we
there
were
used to be.
camouflaging it for 80 years.
Well,
That's all we were doing.
Well, yeah, true. But
yes,
certainly
yes.
since 1945, you
Yes.
could argue there's been a collapse in our ability to collaborate.
I'd actually argue the opposite. I think we're collaborating more. It's just
Really?
we've formed
Well,
into
NATO,
camps.
the EU.
NATO's battle for the bits,
We've gone into camp. I mean, it's a return. It's a return to traditional human behaviour, which gives me an opportunity to bring this into the discussion. Traditional human behaviour is one of progression through competition. Competition was driven by evolutionary pressure.
Yep.
Two groups find themselves in the same place, needing to compete for the same resources.
Yep.
Creates conflict. Competition generates conflict. We are, as you made the point off air, we are barely civilized animals. Yeah. When animals compete for resources, they fight. Yeah?
100%.
To the death,
Yeah.
as we have done for millennia.
Yes.
Yeah, and as we continue to do.
Yes. But
But-
didn't we have the end of history? Wasn't civilization supposed to, our better selves were to come out and we could have some...
So naive.
Peace and
so
Peace and
naive.
normality?
That was
No.
Fukuyama.
Or AI,
Yeah, that's right, the end of
can
history.
AI solve
The end
world
of
peace,
history,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, AI can solve the world peace, and that was the reason for Skynet deciding to extinct the humans. Yes.
It would be a much safer and,
Correct.
and
It's
more
a much
peaceful
safer place.
to
Get rid of
have
those
humans.
And don't let
pesky
it,
animals.
And let's not allow
Yeah.
human that might
Yes.
have 99.975 percentage. Let's give it to the robot that's 99.95%
Correct.
accurate.
That's much more logical
Just
outcome.
think of the benefits to the environment.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
we are presenting as more civilized, but we are realistically just reverting to our traditional competition
I
mode.
completely agree. We have a thin crust of
We have a thin
civilization.
crust.
And that's
Very
Contaminate
thin.
that all.
It's
Yeah.
very, very
I
thin.
completely
But
agree.
for
Turn
that
off the air
thin,
conditioning
there's
on the
been
planes.
multiple options of
Yeah.
that thin crust now of what's now available to society now as well, gentlemen.
But that brings me to the point that this is a marvelous tool, and like all marvelous tools, it can have some risks, and it's never perfect. But about 5 seconds after man discovered that if you find a piece of stone that you can carve into some sort of heavy weapon, you can crush your neighbour's skull with it.
Yes, yes.
You can also bash in a fence post, but it's much more fun to crush your neighbour's
Yes.
skull with it.
And then
Because then you don't need a fence post.
And then to digitize your analogy there,
Yes.
John, is basically taking a cyber and basically destroying someone
Yes.
with defamation.
Why
by-
wouldn't this be used as a weapon?
And we will see, and I believe there are instances where they are mothballing some of this technology to use against others in terms of cyber warfare, and that's only going to get worse. Will it evolve the industry? Absolutely. But whoever has the larger language model, the most sophisticated large language model,
So
I think will.
Well, that happened with Anthropic 3 weeks ago. Anthropic was one of the large AI infrastructure providers to the U.S. Department of War. I still can't get used to that term. And the Department of War, Pete Hegseth, demanded that the Claude technology could be used for any purpose that the department deemed fit, including autonomous weapons, everything. And that breached Anthropic's internal AI safety rules.
Yeah, that's right.
So they drew a line in the sand and said, you can't do that. So they've now been thrown out of the department. And further than that, they have been declared a threat to national security, which in theory means that any organization that works with Anthropic, including Microsoft, Google, anybody at all, is considered a U.S. national security risk. So it could completely decimate their business if it goes through the legal system.
I suspect that demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the capabilities of AI by the Department of War and those who lead it, and also, obviously, what I just mentioned before, the desire to use a new invention as a weapon as soon as humanly possible. Is the next major conflict going to be AI models fighting each other for control?
At the moment, we're not seeing fighting yet, but we're certainly seeing different LLM models perform similar tasks from an IP legal stance. So this LLM model that's used maybe in Asia compared to the States, how they differ, how they're different, who's copying who, what is that unique proposition that they're offering. And then thirdly is then how they're used. So the worst thing you can do, and you know this, gentlemen, is brand and reputation and trust. And once you get that one product that has been misused in terms of either from a security sense or even worse, has been used as a bad actor to defraud a government department with financial acumen or remove financial acumen, will be the end of that area, but also of society as well. So hence Hinton's point around humanity is quite fragile at the moment based on what this can do and the impacts it can have on society.
So what's stopping, or what's creating competition between the AI models? Is it just their functionality that there's one, like Claude, for instance, is being perceived as being more effective or more efficient or more accurate than other models, or how will it shake out? Because with say Microsoft, when Microsoft started, there were a bunch of other operating systems, but Microsoft just became preeminent, and everybody else has gone.
And before, Julian, you jump in, I think we saw this during COVID, right? We saw Zoom was a wonderful product that we used before COVID. We saw the invention of Microsoft Teams during COVID.
Unfortunately.
And that noise still hurts a lot of my tech colleges. Go see the face of you, Julian, of what it is, right? But we saw that evolution and that competition where Zoom, unfortunately, just wasn't able to compete as well as that mass organisational. So there's a number of factors.
Because as our military friends say, quantity has a quality all of its own.
Correct. And to that point, John, based on that quality and quantity is based on where society's going and the fast pace of society and business. We're seeing these products being used in terms of that competition. Oh, quickly, Stephen, don't use that to write your PhD. Here's another product that will help you with researcher. Use it. Oh, well, I did that a lot quicker. Or we use another product. I'll give you a great example in the medical episodes, right? We've got one of the best eye doctors in Australia, and he's competing against a robotic device that removes cataracts. It costs $675 USD to get your cataracts removed in Samoa as an alternative. He charges, and I think I can say this on air, closer to the $10,000, $15,000, but it's a human performing this task. So the competition is actually coming on the disruption of technology, giving you options. And the reason why I say that is now we have an option to choose something based on cost, no loyalty, unfortunately, or based on quantity of the individual performing that task.
Right. Well, this becomes the question then from a marketing point of view. It's one of commoditization, right? So you talked about building trust. You talked about building brand. And so, you have Anthropic who have their own parameters that they won't step outside because they wish to maintain that trust and maintain that brand.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
That immediately that Anthropic pulled out,
yes.
OpenAI ran straight in and
straight
said,
in.
we'll do it, we'll do it, we'll do it.
Sam Altman wasn't going to miss that opportunity, right?
So that will lead to the breakdown in that sort of ethical barriers thing because business is business.
But the point I'm making about the commoditization, and we've seen it in so many other industries, is that brand falls away.
And I guess to our original point of where we first started 70 years ago of technology, it was extremely expensive.
Yes.
Technology was a cost and you had to have it to be competitive. Now, based on the scale of where we are today, being it easily accessible, being cheaper to build and more available than ever, allows anyone to adopt and use that today.
So what's the business model for an Anthropic or an OpenAI? Because they're not charging much for this.
Well, you say cheaper to build. I mean, actually building a frontier model is a massive investment
good point.
in computing resources, data, and interestingly, energy, of course, energy, Interestingly, there are two classes of sort of large language model at the moment. There are the private ones, so we're talking about Anthropic, Gemini, ChatGPT, but there are increasingly a range of open source or free large language models.
Right.
A lot of them are coming from China.
Yes.
In fact, the best ones are coming from China that you can run on
It's
your
a whole
laptop.
other dilemma we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you can run those on your laptop for free if you've got a big enough Mac or something.
Yeah.
And they are maybe 12, 18 months, maybe a bit less behind the frontier models, but kind of keeping pace. In fact, Google released one called Gemma 4 just 2 weeks ago. You can run it on your phone. So if you're on a plane in flight mode, you can ask pretty good questions. It's not the same as Claude, but it's very good. So there is this split, and that's part of back to the ethics and the safety. Is those open source models are completely out of our control, and they can be tuned by hackers, by adversaries who want to create some sort of bioweapon.
Well, it's fundamentally,
bad
if it's open source and you're not charging for it,
Yeah.
you've got to make money from it somehow, or there's some other purpose behind it, right?
Yes.
So if you're making money by selling the data of what people are doing with it, then that's the whole privacy issue,
Yes.
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And security of your transactions and your data. And if you're making money because you're using it for mal purposes, then somebody's paying you to do that,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And we can only imagine what they want to do with that.
Yeah.
And the other issue is strategic positioning of AI. If you have an adversary who has a large chunk of purchase in your marketplace of AI that everyone is now using as an open source because cheap, convenient, and they decide to shut that down, and your entire economy is starting to rely upon that happening,
Absolutely.
Yes.
you're in deep trouble.
Yes. Yes. And you can't replace that we spoke of workforce of the future.
Yes.
Once you remove Bob from producing those documents and that model is no longer there, who is now going to perform that function?
And there's no historical knowledge either.
What is the DR, the BCP model of that process?
This is the equivalent of shutting down your production facilities, your heavy production facilities, car manufacturing, etc. When you lose that capability to manufacture heavy equipment, to build your own AI model
Yes.
in the future, you don't get it back.
Yes.
So
And it's a very interesting point. And Julian,
what are the governments doing to create boundaries? I mean, there's very little role for government in many, many things, but one of the things it should be thinking about is the national security implications of the capability of and the security of your nation, and this is your area as well, in being able to be
Sovereignty.
self-sustaining.
Correct.
We've just seen what happens if we're not self-sustaining in fuel.
you're absolutely right. And we've discussed this because we don't know what's going on, but what we've seen is some nations, like El Salvador, that's just released grok for the whole nation at no charge for the whole education system. Now, we don't know how that's going to happen, how the education system will
And
be.
you better trust Elon.
And Elon's going to get all that incredible data from El Salvador.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to your point, John, the sovereign wealth. So if grok went down, sorry, Elon, if it did, what would that do to the whole
It's a
education?
significant sovereign risk here.
And the same with Australia, you're exactly right, is that what sovereign lane will Australia fall under in terms of at the moment we're in a service consumption model, which is wonderful because we're educating ourselves. We've got a number of researchers that are using LLMs at the moment across multiple sectors. Are we building enough Australian LLM models at the moment?
Our history does not bode well on that.
Would I like us to build more models, Julian? I would say yes.
Do you think we've got the capability?
Yeah, capability and
the money,
and the money and
the
we,
data center infrastructure.
and we actually uplift that, and we've seen that in the Meditech industry, right, John, recently.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it's a huge line that Australia can play in this. You talk about history. Australia, every engineer that was in Australia was shipped off to Europe because of our expertise, right? Are we seeing that now as much as we'd like? Probably not. Would I like to see more of AI engineers being developed in Australia? Yes, and shipped off overseas? Probably not, because we want to keep them here to build capability here for Australia.
But if I can go back just a second to the El Salvador example.
Yes.
If you extrapolate that out, do you see it being feasible that nation states can become captured by these AI machines?
Absolutely.
And
We're all captured already.
We are. when we have standalone systems that we use, and Julian will certainly talk about this, of course, where there is no other way to learn, or you remove another system to consolidate,
Because knowledge is power, right?
you're in big trouble, right?
Yeah.
To your point.
Well, I mean, conceivably, Trump could say, you didn't come and help us in Iran. We're cutting off all access to American AI technologies. Conceivably.
Okay.
Pretty extreme. But
Right
Don't
now,
give
you
her any
could
ideas.
yes, right now you could probably survive that.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not. Yeah,
Right.
we could survive it.
But
Yes.
in
We'd be
the near
seriously
future,
disadvantaged.
when
Yeah.
you've become ever more dependent,
Yeah.
you probably can't survive that.
And,
Yeah,
and to your
exactly.
point, Julian, some of our critical industries, like our cybersecurity, like our mining operations,
Or even
right
just
down
fuel
our
transport.
financial
Yes.
services sector,
Yes.
once we become reliant on that product,
Well,
this is
to that-
this is where the safe AI comes in, the responsible use from a nation and then
Yes.
from an organisational
To
perspective. How it's
precisely that
used.
point, we are fundamentally still a mine and a farm.
We're completely dependent.
And if we are increasingly using technology driven by AI to automate as many of those functions as we possibly can, because nobody wants to go out and harvest in 40-degree heat, and nobody wants to be digging a hole anymore, right? And nobody wants to drive a monster. Well, some people want to drive a monster truck, but very few people want to drive a monster truck in a big hole. Yeah? So these things are all being automated now. They're being driven increasingly by AI models because you need fewer people to do the physical control of it.
Yes.
Someone else has control of that. You've just shut down your entire economy.
And as well as you speak of our IP and our educational sector and where we want to, I can hard on say that there are some roles, gentlemen, that I don't think we need to perform anymore, right? And that's great. But we need to either cross-skill those individuals to embark on that next stage. But secondly, the roles that we should be producing now is of that capability to help us do that more efficiently.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground. I don't think we've solved anything. But
You said you like Doom. So
Yeah,
I'm
you
going
like
up
Doom.
Doom.
You
we
like
did
Doom.
like the Doom.
Yeah,
The
we
Doom
like-
bit, I love the Doom bit. Yeah, makes for great Hollywood scripts. Yes, which will be written by AI.
Yeah,
Thank goodness we're in our 60s
Already
now,
out. The
20s.
music is poor old Hans Zimmer. You know, what's he going to do for a living? Because they can just reproduce his stuff like that.
Yes.
Moving on. So actually into the creative arts for 1 second. We talked about it briefly off air, but the one thing AI can't replicate yet is the creativity of the individual, the ability for us to imagine things, or can it?
So, I mean, I mentioned this earlier. You can make you can make a pretty good clone in anybody's voice, any artist, any musical artist. There's a lot of people doing Nick Cave lyrics.
Yes.
And then Nick Cave made this beautiful comment on it that I loved. He said, but the AI hasn't suffered.
And we're also seeing in financial markets as well, in terms of the cross-border trade. So there are aspects of creativity that hasn't been able to do before, is really what I want to leave us with. And that's the opportunity, is that we still don't know what else we can create.
Yeah, I think we should not think of these tools as replacing us, but augmenting us,
Yes.
bringing out our better sides.
Augmented humans.
Not in a chip in your brain, although Elon would like to put a
Elon
chip
would
in your
love that,
brain,
yes,
literally.
yes,
yes.
But as I mean, this Jeffrey Hinton character, right?
Yes.
He made this quote prediction maybe 7 or 8 years ago. He said, "It's very obvious we shouldn't train radiologists because AI, even then, was so good at identifying X-ray and MRI images that it
Yes.
could identify tumors and stuff better than a
Better than
radiologist."
a radiologist.
Yeah.
In fact, the market for radiologists has actually increased. And the technology means that radiologists can be more effective, they can work quicker, they can see more patients.
Yes.
The demand is greater because it's a better service.
Save more
Correct.
lives.
Yeah, because
That's
it
the
used to
model.
be expensive
Yeah.
and difficult
Yeah.
to do.
That's
Now it's
right.
not, so
Yeah.
therefore
Yeah.
you do more of it.
Exactly.
And just lastly on the wellness space as well. So we're seeing, $1.7 trillion now in the wellness space because now the technology is allowing us to have preventative maintenance on our diseases as well. So again, there's been
We're all going to live to 120.
well, and maybe there could be an opportunity with AI that will help us with the formula,
How will
John,
we
to help us
afford
do that.
On that, have you heard of Ray Kurzweil?
Yes, I have.
So Ray Kurzweil wrote this famous book called The Singularity is Near in the 1990s.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've read it, but I think it was last year or the year before, he produced The Singularity is Nearer. He's been very prescient on a lot of these sort of AI time scales. He predicts we can solve aging. He predicts aging is really just cell.
Well, it's cell
mutation,
regeneration.
Cell
Yes,
regeneration.
it's cell regeneration.
So he's got these incredible predictions about you can plug your memory into the cloud, you can regenerate your cells, we can all live forever. I mean, some of it's
Do
sort
we
of
really want
crazy.
Well,
Is that
How
any
is that
longer
gonna
human?
work?
Yeah.
That's a whole other
No,
conversation.
it is
There are
yeah.
positives and negatives. I
There
want
are.
to wrap it up because we've run
Yes.
significantly over time, but it's been a fascinating conversation, and we've covered even more ground than the 3 areas that we talked about. Hinton worries me, but I suspect he worries a lot of people.
Yes.
Let's just wrap it up with a bit of a thought from you. From a user's perspective, Corne, what are you? Where do you think we're headed? I mean, you've made your living out of writing. I haven't quite as much, but you have. Where do you see this as a tool, as a user?
I see AI replacing the job that I used to do. in a very short space of time. And I said replacing a lot of manual, if you like, jobs. Whether it will free up the future me to do something more fun, I don't know. But I just think that, the internet, as we have known it for the last 20 years, has made the business world completely dependent upon it. And if the internet goes down, business stops, fuel pumps won't pump, and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like a 10% version of what AI is going to be in a few years' time, where AI will be everything to everybody, potentially. And what happens if it goes down? That's that's the type of thing that worries me.
What's our robustness?
Somebody somebody necessarily even getting control of it.
Yes.
But what happens if whatever powers it stops to power it? Because
Absolutely.
it's
Well,
gonna be
those are-
soaking up so much energy.
Yes.
And if that energy is
Well,
not there,
and we need to create that energy too. And we're not going to do it with sunshine and butterflies.
No.
So,
No.
So,
this is why we're talking about things like SMRs. As much as our governments
Yeah.
don't want to talk about them, that's the reality. Why is Warren Buffett in his aged state and the not so young anymore Bill Gates been investing in small modular reactor research?
Yes, absolutely.
Because they want to plug them next to data centers.
Correct.
Yeah. If I can go to you both, gentlemen, with a quick summary: optimism, pessimism, upside, downside. Where are we in the foreseeable future with AI? Are we going to become entirely dependent, or are we going to stay in control of the machines?
Look, I think I have to end on an upbeat note after being so
Yes.
full of doom.
Yes.
There is, and actually, the Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei, he wrote this fantastic paper a year ago called "Machines of Loving Grace," which presents a very beautiful, optimistic view of how our world with AI could develop. And he imagines, imagine walking into a data center and thinking of it as a country full of geniuses, of AI, of sort of Einstein-level intelligence. And each of these, you got racks of servers, they're all glowing. Each of them is working on solving cancer, solving fusion, so we have limitless local energy. And he paints this kind of portrait of how we could compress 100 years of scientific research into 10 years. And that's quite an interesting and provocative idea. And he paints this sort of picture of this post-scarcity world where we live in, where we can generate energy at point of use. We can extract water because we can build, desalination plants wherever we want because we've got limitless energy.
We might even stop fighting with
We
each
might
other.
stop fighting with each other.
Because we've got nothing to fight over.
Is that the end of history?
No, we'll find something to fight over.
animals.
Yeah, we'll find something to fight
fight
over.
over women.
Yeah, well, they can fight. Well, no, they're equal. They'll fight over us. Yes.
Yeah.
Look, I would have to agree. Again, Sam Altman built OpenAI and ChatGPT around improving humanity. And what I love about this era of AI is that we're seeing a number of these problems being solved, not weekly, daily, hourly, second by second. So I just see the power of humanity in terms of helping, specific medical care, again, solving our power issues, revolutionising and adding research to what we haven't been able to, discover many, many moons ago. There's been great historical reviews now in Rome and Egypt in terms of our history and bringing that together and connecting as to why things happened. So I see this great power of this capability being used in those aspects. But we definitely, and this is the caveat, is that wherever there's good in humanity, there is also bad actors. And at the moment, the bad actors work really well with the bad actors and they're working together. The good actors have to collaborate and work together. And I'm not seeing that as I'd like.
Slightly optimistic, pessimistic note, understanding the nature of humanity. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a fascinating conversation. And we may come and revisit it at another time. There's much more to talk about. Our next discussion will be about that oxymoronic thing, military intelligence. Yes.
Just a small bit of AI that uses that one.
Given that we've been witnessing a conflict in which the level of military intelligence has directed what's been happening on the ground or in the air, I'm fascinated. I think
It's astounding.
It's astounding, yeah. So we have access to some individuals who'll be joining us to talk about what is military intelligence and what level of information is now necessary to conduct these sorts of campaigns that we try to do in a sanitized way now.
In a humane way,
fascinating.
Yeah.
blowing people up.
Yes,
Humane.
a clean way of blowing people up.
That's
Yes.
lovely. Yes.
On that cheery note,
Join
thanks
us
very
with
much.
join us with a first aid kit next time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
James.
guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure
Thank
to
you.
meet
Thank you.
Very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.